guys. I am very excited for this episode of Just Ignore It because when Dave and I first started talking about um, the idea of these like conversations, I was like bringing up topics to him, and I was like, I want to talk about being a mom and how my life has changed over the past couple of years and like all these things. And he was like, I don't think I need to be part of that story. So I knew I wanted to do maybe a couple episodes talking about girl things. So today it's just me and you. And I'm really excited because, I've noticed a lot of change in myself. I mean, definitely since becoming a mom, but more specifically in the last few years. And it wasn't like intentional change or, a change that I felt needed to happen. But oh gosh, like I look back at all of the kind of self-care, self-conversation posts that I've done on Hello Adams Family over the last couple years, and I can just see that like progression happening in me and like in my words and in my tone and just all my feelings and so many feelings. It's interesting. And so many of the questions I get from you guys on a daily basis are from people who are going through these big life transitions, like getting married, moving maybe somewhere new, having kids, becoming a mom. And no one really talks about, kind of the identities that we lose when we go through these big, life milestones and changes. And we obviously had a lot of change. I get like nervous to talk about this stuff, which I don't know why. I'm literally just sharing my own life. I'm not talking about anything else. But, I think about last year and having a baby and moving, and just our move was something that we decided to do so quickly. Like, I always tell people that if you're watching this and you don't really know the story, there's a couple posts all about our move to Charleston on helloadamsfamily.com. But so we had rented a house here in Charleston in November of 2020, and I was 32 weeks pregnant. And at the time we were like, let's just see if we can picture ourselves moving here. And during that month, we got a realtor, we put an offer on this house, we'd had the inspection. So by the time we went back to Chicago in December, we knew we were moving, and we hadn't really told anyone. And it was sort of this like roller coaster. We didn't even tell my parents right away, which like during the process, because I had this guilt. I felt guilty, like we were kind of like abandoning this life that I had already pictured in my head back in Chicago. But I say to this day, like if we had never done that, we would have come back to Chicago and been like, yeah, we want to move there. But I would have had George, which I did in January. And if we had not already been planning to move, I don't think we would have ever moved, because I would have been very settled, being near family and friends, and just like, you know what? I mean, life is great there. Life was amazing there. So anyways, huge life change. But I think about, who I was back in Chicago, and not that I've changed, like not that my personality has changed. But it was interesting because we lived in the suburb. Also, I'm home alone right now with George. George is like kind of waking up from his nap. He'll fall back to sleep. What was I saying? Our life back in Chicago was so wonderful, but we lived in the suburb that I grew up in. And I think a part of me kind of always thought that I had to like be the person everyone expected me to be, because I grew up there. I knew, whether I knew someone's parents, whether I knew the owner of the local grocery store, like when your name is just familiar in a community. And as much as I loved it, it was like a little overwhelming and kind of put this pressure on you to just, I'm sure those of you that probably live in maybe your hometowns, like you can relate. And not that I didn't, there are parts of that I totally miss. Like I really miss the familiarity of seeing people I know and having that like routine. Like I still have to map where I'm going most times around here, but I think was kind of heavy on me, and it just put this like added pressure. And I think also being in the industry that I'm in the business, and people, not that I felt like I was taken advantage of ever, but I think it was easy for people to be like, do you want to promote this? Or like, we're local, or I know your mom, and I just felt like it got to a point where I couldn't make my own choices. Like I just had to say yes. And it was starting to it was stressing me out. And I felt like I couldn't say no. And, this industry is funny because it's so social. Like obviously, hi, I'm talking to you right now on a phone. But the more I've worked in social media, I feel like the more, which is such an extroverted kind of industry, I have become so much more introverted. Like I'm very protective of my space. I'm very protective of my family. We've had issues that, the internet's like a scary place. And I think I've learned over time that obviously we all just need to like protect our energies. And I think, through COVID and in the last 2 years, I've just learned how important that is. And so moving to Charleston, as transitional and kind of scary as last year was, it has also been so like exhilarating to, one, not really know anyone and feel like you can say no. And two, to feel like no one, I think because, moving from my hometown, like feeling like nobody knows me, and it's been kind of wonderful. Like I felt like I have really just like settled into my family, into who I am, and just way more content with less, which I think we've all learned has been probably the greatest lesson in all of the whirlwind that has been the last 2 years, has just this idea that we're, content with less. But in that sort of mindset, I look back at so many like transitions of my life and feeling like I have a huge fear of disappointment. And I'm very impatient. Like I feel like if I have the answer, like it has to be done now. And I'm going to say the word, like, I feel like I have to like impress people, but deep down, I don't feel that way, but I feel like maybe because my life is under a microscope, like that's the energy that I have to give off. And I kind of think, with social media now, we probably all feel like that on some level because we feel like there's always eyes on us. And I think that's especially heightened during transitional periods of our lives, like when we, get married and you feel like people are like judging the flowers you chose, or you become a mom and the opinions are just out of this world, next level. And you're like, why can't I just like trust my instinct? And like, it's like, if you ask for an inch, like the whole world's going to give you a mile, whether that's good or bad. And so for so long, I think I felt very consumed by that idea that just everything I did was under a microscope. And I still do, it still is. That's just the nature of the game and working, this being my job. But I refer to this concept a lot of like keeping blinders on. And I think it has just led me in such a beautiful direction in life without knowing. Because I have learned to just like really trust my gut and trust myself and know that like, it's okay to say no to something you don't want to do. Or as hard as moving to Charleston was, away from friends and family, knowing that if I cut out friends, if I cut out family, if like I was just making this decision for me, would it make me happy? And I knew that answer was yes. And does that mean it's still hard every day to not see family and friends? Of course. But I wake up every day and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is the life that I get to live. I know that's easier said than done. And I'm truly so grateful that we had the choice and the option. But I think, you know, like I said, when we made that decision, I couldn't even call my mom and dad right away. Like when we put the offer on the house, I don't think I told them that we even like put an offer on until after we had the inspection, because I didn't want an outside influence to change what I knew in my heart would be an amazing thing. I'm totally rambling, but that's where this idea of having blinders on, you know, I think I relate to it so much in work because I open myself up to opinions very willingly. I love having the conversations that I do with everyone on Instagram, on my blog comments, through email. But I think in the last couple of years, I think like ultimately it's been this like, I don't know why I feel like emotional, but I think it's just like settling into yourself. And I think that is I think that's hard to get to that point and to feel like, you know what, like, Liz, you're my best friend. And like, if worst case scenario, I'm so lucky that I have amazing friends here. I'm so lucky I have amazing friends and family at home. But like, worst case scenario is like you have yourself and your health and your kids and like you have all this happiness around you. And I think like being okay with the less has just made my life so much more enjoyable and like just less pressure on feeling like I'm constantly like seeking for things. Because I think this concept of having blinders on is something that so many people need in this day and age with social media. Social media scares me. Sometimes I meet people and, you know, I'll be with someone, they're like, oh, Liz is an influencer, like she's on Instagram, and this person will be like, oh, I'm not on social media. I'm like, I'm so jealous of you. Because, you know, you like wake up one day and I feel like you look in your closet and you're like, what is all this shit? Or like, I don't even like any of this. I wrote a post 2 years ago called like, have you ever been too influenced or something? I forget what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But, you know, I think there was this moment, I feel like I'm all over the place, but after I had Charlie, I had really bad postpartum. And I think a big part of that was that I felt this urgency or this pressure to be the person that I was before I had him, which was like a fashion blogger and sharing the perfectly posed photos. And I've said this before, the amount of money I spent on iced coffee and peonies just for a freaking picture. Like I remember I spent $50 once on like 5 peonies. And Dave was so mad at me. But so after Charlie, I think I felt like, I was like, I don't even know who I am. Like, who is going to, like, I'm at home, I'm sitting here trying to learn how to breastfeed. I'm basically wearing a diaper and like, I'm supposed to be the fashion blogger. And it really, really like ruined my experience as a new mom. And I feel so sad for that version of myself because when I had Jack, something magical happened when I had Jack. And I've told only a few people this, but when I had Jack, I had this like out of body experience when he came out of my body. I was like, I've met you before. And I just, from the moment Jack came out, I was just like, I am a mom. And truly, I felt like I got to be a first-time mom twice because it was such a different experience. And I really just like learned to let all the noise go. And I think that's where, if I could go back, that's probably where the biggest shift happened in my business because I gave up like trying to be the pretty picture. And I feel like I keep saying, and I think in social media, we're constantly reaching for the pretty picture. Like and guilty. If someone tells me to buy the white blouse, I'm like, okay. If someone tells you to buy the workout shoes, okay, or go on this vacation or save enough for this designer bag, like for so long you felt like, okay, if you're wearing that, I have to wear that too. And like, instead of shopping for situations or picking things because it actually makes you happy. I was thinking back in like COVID, even before COVID, when I felt like no more the color was not a thing in fashion anymore, and it was just neutrals. It was like tan tapered sweatpants. It still kind of is like this. The white tee or the gray sweatshirt and the mom or the dad shoes, which it still is right now. I look at that stuff and I'm like, that would look, first of all, I would look like a gym teacher if I ever wore that. And two, that is just not me. But for some reason, I was like, that is how I have to dress. Like, I have to only shop at Abercrombie and buy the bodysuits with the baggy sweatpants, or like when all the Henley tees, everyone was wearing Henley tees. Like, and now I feel like I'm literally living my best clothing life here in Charleston because I get to wear all my fun prints. Like, that is always what I've loved. But social media tricked me into thinking that's not what I liked anymore. I digress. But I think that concept is so important to see clearly, because influence is not always a good thing. And that's coming from an influencer. But I think more than that side of my business, like, I'm also a consumer and I'm consuming information, and I have felt the negative effects of that. So how did I get here? But I think just, I'm so grateful that over the last year, I've really just like settled into myself and have had even like a clear image of what I want to bring to the table every day. And I think being a woman is so hard. Like, being a mom is so hard. Like, constantly feeling the pressure to be doing better than what you feel like is already your best. It's so hard. And if you can't, like, if you don't feel comfortable in your own skin or like trust your own choices, like, then we have nothing. So I think I'm so grateful that I've sort of just gotten to this point. And I tell Dave that all the time. I'm like, I totally have my bad days. I will forever. But I'm like, I'm just so glad we got here. And like, not here, but like, we've gotten to this point where, sorry, there's a house being built like across the street from us. But I hope everyone gets to feel that point. And I think a big part of that is just drowning out the noise and having blinders on and putting yourself first and your relationship with yourself first, instead of watching what everyone else is doing and asking questions. And sometimes like reading the self-help books, and like sometimes I feel like I listen to that shit sometimes and I'm like, is this foreign language? Like, or I like the quotes, which I love the quotes, but sometimes I'm like, I know, like, tell me something I don't know. I know that that's how I should be living my life, but like, I don't know how to get there, like, by reading this quote. Do you know what I mean? And I think so much of life is that we have to stop listening to everyone else and just like, they say inner work is like the best thing you can do. And I think very unintentionally, I have done a lot of that this past year, just being a little more alone than I usually am, even though Dave would say I'm literally right here, even though I've been with my family, but just kind of alone in this transition of life that I've experienced the last 2 years. So I don't know how I got here. I think in general, I think being a woman is really hard in terms of, maybe it's hard for me because I'm such a creature of comfort and change is like not ideal for me. But, and I think, 25 to 35 or 25 to like 45 even is such a transitional time in our lives where all these things, we have all these milestones where you feel like as soon as you're settled, there's like this shift and you change. And it's like, wait, I didn't know who I was at that previous step, and now I have to become someone else. And this is why blog posts are better for me, because I can just like write and then be like, the end. And in a video, I'm like, how can I say that more eloquently? Anyways, I don't know if this made sense at all, but I think bottom line is that you got to listen to yourself first. And I feel that very strongly more than ever in the world that we're living in. And so, just ignore it. I think the whole purpose behind Just Ignore It is just to make you feel like, or have you know that like you have a friend. Like you see me every day on Instagram, you see me on my blog, but like we're all just real people trying to survive life. And I feel really proud to have this platform, and it is fulfilling to me to share these changes that I've seen in myself, because I want you to feel that same feeling that I feel. And I know it's hard. Like it's hard. Life is hard sometimes. So anyways, I don't know what we accomplished during this conversation, but I feel like it felt good. So happy Friday. Didn't even take one sip of this. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.